There we are. All right. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the QB show. It is, I have to look at the date. It's actually September 22nd, 2015. Really personally wicked fired up for this show today because we are bringing in the one and the only. That's how I would call it. Agent Amy Hosney with the Internal Revenue Service. Fantastic person. We met a while ago. Actually in 2011 to be exact, and we worked on a case together, and we talked for a long time about having Amy come on and talk to us about what she does at the IRS between a couple of different roles, and we have some questions that we're going to ask her, and she's going to give us so much fun information. And people that have been watching the show for a while know my passion around this area, and so I'm really pumped about Amy being here. So just, again, super pumped. Hey, Stacy will be right back. BRB. She had to go put Eric down to bed. Not put him down like a dog put him down. That's inappropriate and not encouraged. But and Stacy had, Woody had a work dinner, so we're sorry that Woody couldn't be here. I know Woody would have really enjoyed being here to see this in action, because I actually just got back from an appointment with my kids, so I didn't get to put my bulletproof vest on to be appropriately prepared in my outfit today. Life happens, right, Amy? So I'm going to, with zero further ado, because we have so much great stuff to talk about, I want to introduce the one and the only Agent Hosney. So, Amy, welcome, and thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you for having me, Dawn. We do go way back. We spent a lot of time together, and we'll get into the details of that in a few minutes, and your role on our trial in U.S. District Court in New Haven, Connecticut. But thank you for having me on the show.
Hey, we love to talk about all kinds of different things. Of course, one of them being the importance of doing a good accounting. And I think that, through the applications that we've been using, and we talk a lot about that on this show, about different apps and accounting systems and things like that, that really it comes down to that end result of unfortunately, the tax return. We call that the necessary evil. Still, everybody has to do it. And so, I'm just really excited to help our audience learn more about that process at the end, where it can go wrong, where it can go right, and why can it go right. So, we've got some questions that we want to ask you. And so the first thing I want you to tell everyone about Amy Hosney. We'd love to hear just about who you are, because you're a person. I didn't know if people knew that, but people that work for the IRS are also people, which is maybe weird, but amazing people, and you specifically. And what is your role at the IRS? Because I know you've had some roles and some have changed, and I want to learn more about who you are first, and then what you do with the IRS. Tell us about that.
Sure. Well, I'm married. I have two sons, 7 and 11, so they keep me running, rocking and running, as you well know, with 2 daughters.
Oh, yeah.
And I've worked for the IRS for over 24 years now, believe it or not. Yeah, it's crazy.
What did you start when you were 5?
That's it, yes.
No.
So I've been with the Criminal Investigation Division for almost 21 years as a special agent, and my background is in finance and accounting, and I started as a revenue officer on the civil side of the house back in '91. So I was assisting taxpayers back then with getting current on their filings, paying past due taxes, and that sort of thing. And then I moved over and started doing criminal investigations.
Interesting. Okay. So I can't figure out, I don't know if this thing is bouncing back and forth or if it's just staring at you the entire time. I'm not really sure. But I don't want to, be all over you like that. But so that's exciting. So that's a long time to be involved, obviously in such a really high intense position, because being in the criminal investigation unit versus maybe being what do they call the revenue agent? Right, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, the differences between the two, because they are two very different types of positions, as you and I have talked about often, because I always wanted to know how to be a criminal investigation agent. I'm way too old, and that's really too bad. But so I would love to hear your side of the story on how we met. So why don't you tell everyone that?
Well, back in 2011, it was in the winter, we needed an expert QuickBooks witness for our trial. And the defendant had been indicted by a federal grand jury on several charges, including 2 counts of tax evasion and also conspiracy. And Dawn was designated by the court as an expert witness. And as you recall, that was quite a process.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, to get that done, the assistant U.S. attorney had to file like a brief, and you had to submit a very detailed resume. And but in any event, we got that done. You were designated our expert witness, and you testified at trial. How long was it, Dawn? Was it 2 full days at least?
Well, so it's kind of one of my favorite stories, honestly, because
I'm sure it is.
It is really, like, I don't know, it's fantastic. So it was a Thursday afternoon that I started on the stand. It was probably maybe an hour, tops 2. And then on Friday, I was back on the stand pretty much most of the day. And then at the end of the day on Friday, the defense attorney decided he wanted to call me back on Monday. And so I didn't know protocol. I didn't know protocol that once that happens, you all can't talk to me any longer. And so I got off the stand. I remember it vividly. I walked off the stand and I walked towards you all, and you all were like running the other way. And I was like, "Where are you guys going?" And you're like, "Nope. Once you've been called back, we can't talk to you until you've been released from," I'll call it from the stand for lack of a better word. And so I was on the stand for, in a total, I would say, of a couple days.
Yes, as I recall, so was I. And it was...
Yes, you were.
Yeah. Did you watch my testimony? I don't remember.
I did. I don't believe I watched the whole thing. I think I caught the end of it. But I do recall being called. I'm not going to say being called back. I was asked to come back by you all to watch the testimony of someone on the defense. I think it was actually the defendant, to watch his testimony, and then I was writing down a whole bunch of questions. Ask him this, ask him that, ask him this, ask him that, because I really wanted to make sure that, you know, knowing the QuickBooks side of it and the way the questions were being asked, I knew there were certain things I wanted in you know, when it was the prosecution's witness, I wanted to make sure that they asked some of the right questions that I felt were important. And whatever. So, but it was, I mean, it was really exciting. I remember I got a call, and I can't remember the young man's name, but I think I was on Fisher's Island, and he said, "I'll come get you. I will totally come get you." And I said, "You know what? I'm on my way. Just alert the state police that I'll be going 100 miles an hour." So
was that Jeremy Tendler?
It was Jeremy. That's right. It was Jeremy. He's a little cutie. He's like, "I'm going to come get you with the blue light." And I was like, "Don't make me promises that you won't keep." And I hauled down 95 at about 100 miles an hour in the red van, which we still have, and it was.
You still have that?
We still have the red van. She's still, I mean,
awesome.
She's a blessing. 250,000, awesome. Still cranking along. So yeah, so that was about. It was a couple
There's
of.
Cat.
There's a cat. We got a cat.
I had to step away to let my cat in because he was scratching at the door, and then
I see a cat. We see him. We see back there. There's a cat.
He'll be jumping up here any minute. I'm sure.
He's being shy. Look at how shy he's being.
Oh, he's like, "Oh, the camera. Oh, the camera."
He must see your cat. I bet you he sees Shannon's cat.
It's awesome.
Shannon's cat.
That's so awesome. So cool. So we were just, Stacy, we were just kind of like talking about how we were doing that trial together, which was.
I heard, because I got a new headset.
Ooh, that's fancy.
And so I could listen while I was upstairs. Yeah, it's kind of fancy. It really isn't. It was only like $50 at Meijer.
That must be a local. It's not a convenience store, probably.
No, Meijer is like one of those things where the last time I went, I got some underwear for Eric, strawberries, soy sauce, this. It's one of those, and cat litter. You know what I mean? It's like one of those, but you can get like everything if you need to. Here's a cat right there.
That's pointing. It's a pointer. That's a pointer, the tail.
Yeah, so I don't know what exactly she's doing. She doesn't pay any attention to me unless I have the camera on. Yeah. I swear. She ignores me. I mean, if she had middle fingers, she would be flipping me off all the time.
Wow. All right, well,
yeah. So I was listening, and it was an awesome story, and I completely remember when that was all going on, because you would do the show, and you would be like, I'm in the bunker, because you couldn't tell anybody what you were doing. I knew what you were working on, but I knew that you were working on this case with them, but you couldn't say it on the show. You couldn't tell anybody. You didn't want to tell anybody what you were doing on the show. So
I remember I sat up in one of their conference rooms one night because we stayed till 2 in the morning every night preparing, and I was like, I got to do my show, and oh hey buddy,
hi,
you got to look here. Oh, hey, Scotty. Oh, this is that kind of show. Come, what are you doing? What number's on your shirt? First of all,
what is that? Scotty? Come in and say hello. He wants to be on YouTube. He wants to be on YouTube.
Oh, he will be. He is now.
He's on YouTube.
He's a heartbreaker. He's a heartbreaker.
Hi, bud. What's your name?
Scott.
Hi, Scott. What's going on?
Nothing.
Nothing. We're making your mom work late. I'm sorry.
All right, snack, bud.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, buddy. He's like,
adorable.
There he is. He's been on YouTube. Done. All set. Fulfilled all of his fantasies being on the QB show right now. So I would love to. Well, I'm Stacy. Do you want to? We're just kind of like chatting away.
I don't know.
We were just
already went through like a few of the questions, right? Like how you guys met and.
We did. Well, we're just going to talk about the third one.
I know. I'm dying. See, I kind of know because I heard about this after it was all done. So I'm gonna ask because I already know, but for our audience members who don't know, the case that you guys were working on, I know what it was and it's awesome. But can you talk about the case that you worked on and why QuickBooks was such an important part of the case? Because it's really fascinating. And I just want to say, well, I'll wait till you guys are done and get to the part where I was like, damn, that is evil genius. I never would have thought to do that. So.
Okay. Well, first we had to start at ground zero, and Dawn had to explain to the jury, many of whom had no accounting or tax background, the basics of bookkeeping, accounting, and QuickBooks all at the same time. So, I mean, this was basic assets equal liability plus equity. I looked at it today, Dawn, and it brought back a ton of memories. And the first PowerPoint is like 87 pages. So in there, you go through everything, and the chart of accounts, the preferences, which were key, I think, in this case, the profit and loss, the balance sheet, the whole nine, and then we get into the account.
Did you just say the preferences that were key in this case? Oh, I know. Like, I'm so excited. I can't wait for you guys to get into the juicy parts. Okay, I'm going to be quiet.
And so anyway, really the QuickBooks evidence in this case was crucial in proving the intent to convict him. His name is Steve or Stavros Ganius, on the 2 counts of tax evasion. Without it, we really wouldn't have been able to prove it. So we had obtained the QuickBooks data files. There were several that were seized from his business computers pursuant to 2 separate search warrants. So that's a whole other story that the second part. It just goes on and on. But the case is on appeal right now before the Second Circuit. And but that is where we got the QuickBooks files that Dawn and myself and the team analyzed in painstaking detail.
Oh, it was not painstaking at all.
Well, basically it was very, it was very easy at the end of the day, but without the file we couldn't have done it. And basically what he did was he took some of his big income items from one of his main clients and some he didn't post at all, others he posted to owner's contribution, a non-income account, never hit his sales, and never got reported to the IRS. So at the end of the day, it was very fundamental and easy to see, but without the file itself, it would have been almost impossible to prove.
Yeah, and so one of the really interesting pieces that we, as you know, because we take for granted the stuff that we know about QuickBooks, that when certain processes are followed or not followed is when people run into trouble. And of course, with the changes in QuickBooks that have happened over the years, you know, setting up a data file, one simple thing is when you opened, at least in the year 2000, which was the year of the data file, right? So we didn't upgrade that data file in 2011 because the preferences would have been different.
I remember that, and you had a hard time finding a copy of 2000.
Well, I found a friend at Intuit who sent me a copy, which was wonderful. Because
remember I had 98, 99, and I had 2001, and 2000 was the only one that I was missing.
It was like it was disintegrated from the earth.
Yeah, it's like
just bye, gone.
Yeah.
So I was so thankful. So we were able to get that and keep it in its truest format for the case, because when you started a brand new data file, and there was some testing that I did, it was so long ago, I was able to say, hey, listen, okay, in 2000, when you created a brand new data file, there was nothing called owner's contribution as an auto-generated account when you started it, which means you had to intentionally set up an account called owner's contribution, specifically those words.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, that was one of the intent parts, because he was depositing or posting things to owner's contribution, which wouldn't show up on his P&L, but it was an equity account. And so because it was intentionally set up as an equity account, and there was intentional postings into an owner's contribution account, that proved the intent of the postings in QuickBooks, which is why it didn't show up as revenue on the P&L and why it was underreported by a lot of money. And so that was one of that particular piece of evidence that was true to be true, because we kept it in that year, was really, really key. Yeah. That was one of the many, and there were other things like preferences that we found out were like, holy crap, like you had to know to switch this preference over.
Yeah. It was really like one of those things where I always think when people do that sort of shit, like if you would just like use that for good and not evil, think about all the stuff that you could do. It just always amazes me, like when people spend so much time and energy thinking of these elaborate schemes. It's like you could use that brain power for something so much more productive.
Kidding. Absolutely.
Kidding.
He's getting, see? Caught a glimpse of Shannon's cat, and that's it. He's up here.
Exactly.
The other key thing, too, we spent a lot of time introducing at trial bank records, and those bank records showed that for these income items, which were fairly large, maybe say on the average $11,000, $12,000 each, he would go to the bank and cash it out because that client had the same bank. And then he would just take usually a portion of the cash, put it on the business ticket as cash, and make a deposit. Yeah. So if say he was being audited and, you know, the revenue agent happened to summons his bank records, it would just show up as cash. And
right.
Then his QuickBooks, it would just look like, oh, he got money from family members, or he used his own money to make a capital contribution to the business. We had the benefit of having the records of the company because we had done a search warrant on that company as well. So we had all of their checks, and we had their QuickBooks that he also maintained. And that gets into a whole another ball of wax that, Dawn, I sent you the sentencing memorandum today.
Yep, I saw it.
Detail about the tax evasion that he was involved in for these multi-million-dollar companies as well, not only his own taxes.
Right.
That's so crazy to me. Just so crazy.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the loss in this case was over $1.3 million. So it was his own taxes and then also the taxes of these companies that he was also doing the books for and preparing tax returns.
Oh my gosh. I'm gonna not say anything because I'm gonna swear. So what a
He is a former IRS employee. He was a revenue agent himself.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he left the IRS probably in the late 80s and started his own bookkeeping and tax prep business.
Oh yeah. I'll say we saw, because of the seizure of the file, I just was like, he's working on all these clients, and like it blew me away. It was so irresponsible. That's what I would say.
Oh my gosh.
My goal, of course, is Amy and I talked a couple weeks ago. I want to get the court, the transcript.
Ooh, yeah.
That defense attorney let me say some things that no defense attorney ever should let the witness say. He would ask me questions, and I was just like, oh, okay, you know what, I'm going to test this guy. And I would say something back and wait for him. I object. I was hoping, because, on TV, everyone objects. So the objections, I was mortified. But then I'll tell you, one of the really stressful things about that case was that that weekend when I couldn't talk to you guys, I was convinced that this attorney had people in my driveway, that they were researching me, that they were trying, defame my character. So they were probably researching on the internet some junk they could come up with to get me on Monday. And I didn't sleep all weekend, and I couldn't even talk to my friends because nobody could talk to me. Anyway, I don't want to.
You were sequestered. Actually, the case agent is the only one that can sit in the courtroom and listen to everyone and then also testify in most situations. So that was kind of a nice perk. But
yeah, and it was super fun. Just the transcriber lady, adorable. And so I, of course, talk really fast. So she and I were kind of like eyeballing, and I was like, so what I was thinking, and she's like, thank you. I was slowing down, and I looked at her, and then Ausa King said, okay, you can stand up in the box, and I was like, are you kidding me? So as soon as they would ask a question, I would be like, okay, so over there, and I was like, they let me kind of just be me, and the defense attorney just let me. It was just rocking. I mean, I could talk this. I'm sorry, Stacy, but this has been one of the cases that just changed how I thought about things. And of course, I'm just going to say this, Amy, and it's totally cool because a CIA agent carries a gun. I'm just going to say they do, right? So I'm just saying that they have that capability. I was just so impressed with that. Anyway,
right.
So I'm sorry, Amy. I had no choice.
Okay, that's okay. It's good.
That's the whole reason I love it. It's not. But so let's go back to the Amy Hosney of old, which was 125, because you said you've been in this arena for 24 years, I believe you said. So you started at the 5 or 6 year old area based on back in 30.
Right. Yeah, she must have been still in elementary school. I'm assuming.
That's impressive, everybody.
What's really it's really impressive that you were able to pass all those tests and stuff. So.
Yeah, that's right.
Hardcore. So when in the world did you decide you were going to be an IRS agent of any kind? First of all, so when did that magic happen for you?
Well, it kind of happened by accident. I was working as an accountant out of college at a nonprofit agency, and about a year, and I just kind of learned all that I could learn in a small, it was maybe a $3 million budget. It wasn't very big, and 100 employees, and I was just ready to move on. So I saw the RO job, the revenue officer job, opening in Norwalk, Connecticut, and that's where I started. I went for an interview and basically got the job. And then once I got in, I learned about the Criminal Investigation Division. I had never really heard of it before I started, and I knew right away that was the job I wanted to do. And
so, revenue officer. That's a good. I mean, I'm not going to jump ahead, but sort of like, what is a revenue officer? Like,
they are the collection side of the IRS. So it's a civil job, and they work with both business and individual taxpayers to bring them into compliance, whether they haven't filed 941s or they're delinquent on their payroll taxes or their individual taxes. You just either set up payment plans or determine, get financial statements, determine their ability to pay, and get them on the right track. So when it gets to the field level, it usually is, a certain dollar amount criteria, and you go from there. So we would file tax liens if they couldn't pay to protect the government's interests and so forth.
So just
it was a hard job.
That's a tough job because people are not usually happy.
Exactly. Yeah. You're dealing with people that are experiencing financial difficulty, whether with their job or their business, and now you're knocking at the door and trying to collect the taxes too. So.
And that's a tough spot. And just so you know, when I'm typing, we do like a Twitter thing. So I just tweeted and just said revenue officers equal collections is a civil position. So it helps we have some people that follow us on Twitter, and so that I want them to also experience, and the people chat, and I told them, I love this woman, I don't care if she works for the IRS, that's what I put. Because I love you, I'm partial, so I don't care. So interesting, okay, so you just say you're a revenue officer, you start there, and you're like, hey, I want to expand and do something different, so then you moved on to what? What was next?
Then I became a special agent with the Criminal Investigation Division. So I applied for the job, and I got the position, and I went down to our academy is in Georgia. It's called FLETC, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Academy, and it was 6 months of training. And then I came back to Norwalk and started my career.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. So that's something, again, criminal investigation, obviously, I would guess that would be more exciting than being a revenue officer. And I don't mean like that you arresting people for IRS issues. I'm not saying that that's not what I'm saying, but just from having a position in the field, it just has a little bit more interest than collections. For you, again.
For me, my personal preference is I think it's the greatest job in the service.
Right.
I like the aspect of being a law enforcement officer, but also being able to use my forensic accounting skills to, analyze, QuickBooks or bank accounts or whatever it may be, and and the best of both worlds, so to speak.
Right.
You're out in the field, you're conducting interviews, you're doing, preparing for search warrants, and at the end of the day, analyzing a lot of records too. But that's what we do. So.
Right. And you have obviously certain procedures that you're following. So as far as a few of the cases, why don't you tell us, because I want to get to, obviously we're going to get to the QuickBooks areas, because people are very curious, people that follow and watch the show, want to know more about, like we said in the beginning, our job is to do the record keeping, do tax returns, do app integration, whatever it is that we're doing. There ends up being an end result that can, in some ways, if we're not careful, and or the taxpayer is not open and honest with us, we could run into people like you, which we don't want to do.
No, unless it's like this.
Well, unless it's like this. I mean, seriously, or that restaurant, which was really good. We had a good lunch. So we want to get into that area, but I'm really curious about some of the cases that you've been working on. Recently, and what are some of the biggest issues with the taxpayers that you're seeing? So, just kind of like open it up to tell us about some stuff.
Sure. Well, let me just back up first and just explain. You had asked one of the questions. I kind of have to mention this first to get into some of the cases. About a year ago, I became the public information officer. Yes. For New England. So our field office is the Boston field office, and it comprises the 6 New England states: Mass, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire. So I work closely with all the special agents and the U.S. Attorney's Office to ensure, the timely press releases are issued on all of our actions, whether it be an indictment, an arrest, a guilty plea, a sentencing. Those are the main, sometimes an arraignment. and ensure that we get media coverage on the cases. So, you know, in that vein, I communicate with reporters. I do outreach such as this to kind of get the word out. I draft quotes and speeches for our special agent in charge. He's the boss of our field office. He's out of Boston. And, you know, we've had a few press conferences that are really neat that I wouldn't speak at, but the big boss speaks at. And so in that vein, I do have some, you know, some cases, some recent cases that I thought were interesting to explain to everyone. And I kind of touched on all the different areas that we have jurisdiction over and the types of cases that we work. Do you want to go over a little bit the difference between civil and criminal, like the revenue agent versus...
Yeah, that's a great... Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, here, I'm just going to close the door. I think my son's doing his homework.
We don't mind. We can't do anything. She's got sparkly pants like me.
Yeah, I do. I
got sparkly pants like that. I totally do. Just want to say that.
They're bedazzled. They're bedazzled.
They're fabulous.
They are fabulous.
So you know a couple revenue agents, actually, Barb and Jackie. Jackie was going to tune in. I don't know if she's listening or whatever, but...
Hi, Jackie.
Yeah,
Jackie. So sweet. Oh, my goodness. She's really fabulous person.
So they are our revenue agents, and we have those two assigned to our criminal agents, and they do all the technical, they run the tax numbers, and they are invaluable to us. They really know, you know, all the tax law inside and out. But they have basically 3 units, which you're probably aware of. They have the small business and self-employed division. You know, so they conduct audits of and examinations of individuals and small businesses to determine the correct tax liability. Then we have the tax-exempt and government entities division. So those revenue agents primarily just deal with your nonprofits and government entities. And then the revenue agents in the large and mid-sized division work on the large corporate cases. So they've got years of experience. Like, I don't know if you remember Ganius, but he was like an international revenue agent that came up during the trial. He really worked on some complex accounting transactions and tax law. And then in CI, our mission is a little bit different. I mean, obviously, you know, we serve the public by investigating potential violations of the code, the Internal Revenue Code, and related financial crimes in a manner that fosters confidence in the tax system and compliance with the law. So, you know, one of the big reasons we do what we do is to foster voluntary compliance. We want to get the word out about our cases, and, you know, so that all your neighbors, I mean, everyone should pay their fair share, is my belief.
Right.
Yes.
And, you know, interesting that you say that, Amy, because about the, you know, making sure that people are in compliance. And that's a lot of the stuff that we've been running into is, you know, we literally got a call yesterday, somebody that's it's basically out of compliance. They're like, well, we owe this money and we want to get on a payment plan. Well, you're not in compliance because you haven't filed 14, you're still in compliance until October 15th if you did a proper extension. But people don't realize that people become or not in compliance, and that is a lot of times what causes these issues. You can't not file your return for 8 years. Like, that's, you know, you're not off the radar, in case you're wondering.
Yeah, and like you said, the best thing to do is just come forward, get up to date on everything, and, you know, do the best you can to pay what you owe, like get on a payment plan or whatever.
And it doesn't. How far back? What I'm wondering is, do you go? I just saw a post on one of the forums where somebody was getting questioned for returns from 20 years ago.
Well, there are different statutes in different circumstances, but generally, for the criminal statute on most tax violations is 6 years. Some are 5. Then civilly, for audit purposes, they can typically go back 3 years. But then if there's fraud or greater than 25% omission, then that changes too, and it's lengthened. It could be 6 years, there could be no statute in certain circumstances. So it really kind of depends, but there is generally a statute for all criminal and civil. They're just different.
Yeah, and I think the post was because they were looking for, I think, maybe a tax attorney to help because it was something that had to do with a disabled spouse, and so that just by the vagueness, it just sounded very fraudy, like it was a.
Well, there's a reason, right?
Yeah.
It's
So,
not like, they're after me back 20 years, and I'm a good girl.
right, well, no, and that wasn't the case. He was just like, hey, they need does anybody know a tax attorney, somebody who can help me with this?
Yeah.
And somebody else had posted like 20 years, and it's like, yeah, they're gonna come, they'll find you, right? Amy, you guys will find them.
Yeah, 20 years is quite a long time. If you're delinquent that long, how do you even have the records going back that far?
Well, yeah, but it wasn't just that. They were going back, I think, that it started and was kind of
continuing.
Yes. So they were like, I think this client needs some help. Just maybe saying. So anyway.
All right, yeah, so go ahead, Amy. Keep going, sister. This is good.
So just getting back to CI, so, as law enforcement officers, we have jurisdiction over all the tax statutes, obviously. There's, making a false statement on a return, tax evasion, failure to withhold and pay over payroll tax is another felony. And then there's also, we have jurisdiction over money laundering and violations of the Bank Secrecy Act. So, greed is the motivation for most criminal enterprises. So, CI works closely with, we're on many joint agency task forces, and we work usually for the U.S. Attorney's Office on our cases. We can work administrative tax cases, but for the most part, I'd say the majority are worked out of the grand jury process, where we work for the U.S. Attorney's Office.
There's a good question that one of our very good friends, Christine, in the chat room asked, and I think it's a question that people ask me all the time even. Just, hey, how long do I have to keep my records? And I this is my favorite answer. It depends. So forever. But I believe it really does depend because, again, like you were saying about the statute of limitations, if you have a situation where the IRS can civilly go back 3 years, then you should keep 3 years if it's a civil case. If it turns into a criminal case, it's 6 years, so you should have your stuff. But if it's fraudulent, you better keep your stuff forever. So, is that the same kind of guidance you would give on the records?
Yeah, that's, like you said, it really does depend. I mean, some people, the 7 years, like I've heard many people say, well, I tell clients to keep records for 7 years. I guess it depends. Are you in business? Are you just a wage earner?
Right.
In the latter instance, everything's electronic now. You have your copy of the return saved electronically. Obviously, keep a printout, but I would have to defer that to their tax professional. I don't want to give a general answer on that.
Yeah, and I think it does. Like from my guidance that I tell my clients, I typically say, hey, listen, if you're running a legit business and things are on if they came into audit and you've given me the exact information that needs to be and we can back it up with all your receipts and we've got stuff, then we should be fine even in a criminal thing in 6 years. But if they come in and they say, hey, where did this come from? Where did that come from? And open up another can of worms. Yep. Don't rely on my 6-year recommendation because that's something you didn't give me or disclose all the information. So it's just that's the hard part about this scenario because I have seen criminal audits that are going back to 2007 that people are still,
When you say a criminal audit, there really isn't such a thing. Like the big difference between a civil IRS case and a criminal is once it's in our hands, it's our burden to prove the case.
Right.
So we can't just ask the taxpayer for anything. We have to get the records either through search warrant or through third-party subpoena or some other. They have a Fifth Amendment right against self-incriminating themselves.
Mm.
The situation of a sole proprietorship. Corporation is different.
Yep.
Serve them and get records, but. You know, so again, in the instance of a business, obviously I've seen on searches where businesses keep records going back 15 years. I mean, there's other reasons besides tax matters and implications where they're keeping their records for much longer.
Right.
I've seen warehouses full of, 500 boxes, that far back.
Right.
Yeah, in a nursing home case that I worked. But, then you're getting into medical record. Like, there's all different retention requirements depending on what kind of business it is.
Right, right.
Sorry,
I interrupted you on
oh, that's okay. No problem.
Because I definitely want to hear so. Because I love that the new position that you have or that you've been involved in is informing the public, like keeping people up to date. Because I don't think that we really get that exposure, and that's what you're working on to try to give us, that public relations piece.
Exactly.
About that.
Yeah, most people I'm learning don't even realize that we exist, our unit within the IRS. They don't even realize we have a law enforcement arm that works criminal cases. Even many of our senators we're learning, and congressmen aren't even really aware of it, which is kind of mind-boggling. But
not all at the same time.
Yeah. So, just to kind of give you some perspective, we're a very small part. Right now there's about 2,300 agents, or there will be by the end of this fiscal year with attrition and retirements. And at our high, we were at about 3,300 agents back in '95. So that was 20 years ago. So we've kind of dwindled over the past several years. But anyway, like I was saying, the burden of proof in a civil matter is more on the taxpayer. Like, okay, here, you claim, here's your income, here's your expenses, now prove how you got this number. And they have to do that, otherwise it's disallowed or the income is adjusted accordingly. So in a criminal case, it's totally different. They don't even have to talk to us. They could just decide, get counsel and decide, I'm not going to even answer one question. So, it's a totally different perspective, so to speak. But I don't know if you want to go over some of the cases now. I do have some that I could talk about that are fairly recent. I think that people will find interesting.
Absolutely. I know I will.
Yeah, I'm just looking. Bear with me. I just have some notes here on some of them. I'm looking for some of the press releases. Here we go. Yeah. So the first one is one that I actually worked this investigation with the FBI, and there were two defendants, Jason Sheehan and Glorvina Constant. They were each just sentenced. He got 37 months in jail, in prison, so a little over 3 years. And basically, his scheme involved bankruptcy and tax fraud.
Oh.
And he owned a company. It was called Infinistaff. It was out of New Haven, and they provided staffing throughout the state, primarily manufacturing type staffing. And he had filed a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and then proceeded over a period of time to basically, he failed to account for and pay the IRS more than $2.5 million in employment taxes the company had withheld from employees' paychecks. So all those employees get the credit for the taxes when they go to file.
Right.
Even though it was never paid over. It was withheld from their check. He was entrusted with it, but he never paid it over. So basically how it worked was he falsely claimed that another company called a professional employment organization was being paid by the company to process their payroll and prepare and file the payroll tax returns and tax payments. He also falsely represented to the IRS that this company, it's out west somewhere, was making tax deposits under its taxpayer ID number. And although they did have this arrangement for a short period of time, it had terminated, and then this went on for many, many months. It was well over a year. And during that time, he embezzled a significant amount of money out of the bankruptcy estate. Yeah.
I just don't understand how people don't think they're going to get caught.
Yeah, it's the Constant, Glorvina Constant was his wife, and she received a no-show wage of over $354,000. She didn't even work for the company. So that was one way that they got money out of the company. They also purchased a home for $650,000 in her name, using funds that were embezzled from the company. So yeah, so he pleaded guilty to one count of willful failure to collect, account for, and pay tax. So that's the payroll tax, like the 941s. Do you do a lot of those for clients? Yeah. So real straightforward stuff here. But huge dollars because he had so many employees. And what else? He pled to one count of embezzlement from a bankruptcy estate and one count of making a false declaration in a bankruptcy case. Every month he would have to submit monthly operating reports to the court, and he would put on there this fee to this company, which was non-existent. It was a huge fee. It included all the payroll. It was like his largest expense. So he would sign this under the penalties of perjury month after month after month. And, you know, in the meantime, everyone's trying to check and verify, and all this time went by, and basically all that money went south.
Oh my gosh.
And that's one of the things, you know, people are like, oh, you know, I'm getting audited, all this other stuff, and I'm like, yeah, but so you listen to a situation like a case like this of $2.5 million, and all of those employees got their refunds or had the withheld in the Social Security and Medicare, their half, all credited to their account, and yet now the government's out the $2.5 million, and they're trying to get it back, and people are mad at the IRS for trying to get the money back that this guy basically had lived off of for all these years. And I mean, it's just crazy. It's crazy.
That was just the employees portion.
That's insane.
There was additional funds.
Wow.
There's another $1.4 million of the employer portion that he was charged with, but not for his plea. It's kind of complicated, but it was still included in the restitution order, but they agreed, the agreement that they reached was just really the employee portion, because that's, you know, that's what these people are all getting credit for.
Right.
You know, he took it out of their check to turn it over, and then he never did. So yeah, so that's that was an interesting payroll tax case, which I figured you and your clients and the other people that watch probably deal with on a regular basis.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. Insane.
Another area I just wanted to touch on, because I think it might affect some of your clients. It's been just a huge problem, and it's one of our biggest initiatives and priorities right now. It's stolen identity refund fraud. So I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It's called surf cases, and people's identities are just getting stolen in huge numbers right now. I'm sure you've heard on the news all the data breaches that are going on. There's Blue Cross Blue Shield. Their IRS had one with the Get Transcript account. You know, it just goes on and on. OPM just had one, several banks recently. And but what these people do when they get a hold of basically the name and the social, they don't really need much more, is they go and immediately file a fraudulent tax return. And this, we have a whole procedure in place. It's on the IRS.gov website on what to do if your identity is stolen and a return is filed in your name. You know, the first step is to file a police report. The next step is to complete I have all the information here. An identity theft affidavit, just explaining in detail, you know, what happened. And we had a great case worked out of our Bridgeport office on an individual named Julio Lara Trinidad. He basically, let me find this one. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison, which is a huge sentence on a tax case. For a scheme that resulted in a loss of more than $7.5 million from the U.S. Treasury.
Oh my gosh.
I'm just going to read a little bit verbatim from the it's a really interesting case. So, let's see, there's a bunch of quotes in here. Okay, so this guy was arrested in New Jersey for stealing U.S. Treasury tax refund checks out of mailboxes. He pleaded guilty down there to a related charge in 2012. An arrest warrant was issued after he failed to appear for a sentencing. So then he was basically in the wind. While he was a fugitive from justice, he and his co-conspirators opened at least 59 bank accounts in the names of identity theft victims. depositing U.S. Treasury tax refund checks into the accounts, and then quickly withdrawing the funds, resulting in more than $663,000 in loss to the U.S. Treasury. Between 2012 and February 2013, one of these accounts was used to purchase, this is the kicker you'll appreciate, 6 licenses for a brand of tax preparation software. These licenses were then used to file more than 36,000 federal income tax returns, seeking $234 million in false federal refunds. And nearly of that $234 million, nearly $6.8 million was in fact paid out.
I have to pick my jaw up off the floor.
Yeah.
Oh my Lord. Oh my gosh.
So hence, this,
that is shitballs crazy. I'm just going to say that.
yeah,
Some
12
of these are insane.
12 years, I was just so happy to see this sentence. Sometimes, you know, the judges have a wide discretion on their sentences that they hand down, and sometimes in the white-collar cases, I'm biased, so I don't always agree. Sometimes I think they're lighter than maybe I would like to see them. But anyway, I thought this one really,
Wow.
yeah, this was a very labor-intensive case. It involved a lot of special investigative techniques, a lot of nights, a lot of following people around, and
Oh, you gotta call me.
kudos to the agents that worked. Actually, that was, the agent, Dawn. Jeremy.
Jeremy, I love him. He needs to call me. I'll totally be his ride-along. I will buy it. I will totally do that.
Oh, so let's see. We also, another one of our priorities is public corruption. And, well, Stacey, you don't live in Connecticut, but we've had quite a storied history with corrupt politicians.
I'm in Michigan. I don't know if you've ever heard of the city of Detroit.
Yeah, you've had your share too, right?
I don't know. Kwame Kilpatrick.
Yeah.
Heard of
So
him?
we have former Governor John Rowland, his chief of staff Peter Ellis, state contractor William Tomaso, former Bridgeport mayor Joseph Ganim, who, by the way, I think is running again. I saw that he's trying to get a bid for re-election. Former Waterbury mayor Phil Giordano, state senator Ernie Newton. The list goes on, but one of the most recent cases to come out of the Public Corruption Task Force was David Burtnagel. And this guy was the finance director of the town of Plymouth. And in that very crucial role, he embezzled $800,000, actually more than $800,000, from the town. He was recently sentenced to 30 months in jail for embezzlement. What he did was he had the whole kit and caboodle there. He issued 207 checks to himself from the payroll account.
I'm sorry. That makes me laugh. Like, no one's going to catch that.
And the great thing about embezzlement cases, and we see this time and again, we work many of these types of cases, a lot of times it's a bookkeeper that's working for a company and has free reign on the checkbook or the credit cards. They also make entries into the QuickBooks and so on. But a lot of times when they embezzle money, they don't report it on their tax return. So federally, it's a great charge. So he was also charged with filing false tax returns for 2012 and 2013 for failing to report any of his embezzled income. This resulted in a tax loss to the government of over $145,000. So it's a nice way for us at the Treasury to also, get some of the money.
Yeah.
Well, listen, if you're going to embezzle, you should at least pay tax on it.
That's right.
Yeah. Duh.
It's
You
still
don't have drugs, just report the revenue.
That's right. Illegal payments are still income.
That's right.
Bribes.
Exactly.
I gotta tweet that. That's awesome.
Right in the code. It's right in the code.
I love that.
But
What, that embezzled money?
Yeah.
Yeah. Embezzled money is still taxable income?
Yeah.
Yeah.
they're non-deductible, though. They're non-deductible if you're paying them.
That's right.
Which is nice. It's kind of like double whammy.
Damn.
Okay, I wanted to talk next briefly about, this was kind of an interesting tax evasion case. Let me find the press release. But basically, several state employees who work for the state of Connecticut have been either indicted or pled guilty or are in some stage of adjudication. And one of them, Stephanie Elliott, she's from West Hartford. She was just sentenced to 16 months in jail, followed by 3 years of probation for tax evasion. And her scheme, I mean, this is a wage earner, so she would receive a W-2. But what she and the others did is they filed false W-4s with the state claiming 99 exemptions. So they could no tax withheld. But this one, these were egregious cases. Like in her case, it went on for 5 years, 2007 through 2012. There were no tax returns filed.
I just wouldn't have the balls to do so. How do you think that you're not going to get caught? Oh, okay.
And this matter actually stemmed from an IRS investigation into state employees and others who had little or no federal withholding taken out of their paychecks and who failed to file income tax returns. So it's kind of like what we call a general investigation, where we'll try to develop cases by looking at a certain segment or doing a data dump of, okay, let's see all the W-2s that have no withholding for certain income levels that haven't filed returns, let's say. And then, you take all that data and you start looking at it, and, some cases come out of it. Some don't rise to the level of criminal,
right,
civil matter, but, that was an interesting one, I thought.
Wow.
That's nuts.
Do you want? I had about 3 more to discuss if you want me to go through them.
Oh, keep them coming, because this is fascinating.
So I wanted to touch on money laundering, because we do have jurisdiction over money laundering, and there are several different federal statutes, and we can use money laundering in illegal type activities like drug cases, but also we can also charge this in white collar schemes that are really complex, where there's a lot of money flying around. And we just had one last week that I thought was a great case. It was worked out of Boston, but in the Southern District of New York, the U.S. Attorney's Office down there. But this agent really did an excellent job. 2 individuals, Darcy Wedd and Erdolo Eromo, were arrested.
I love that you're giving everybody their names, too. Like, I love that. You're like, what happens when you do this?
Now. Yeah, because it's public record, and they've been arrested. And we got a press release that actually went out to all the papers. There was a lot of press, nationwide press, on this case, because it's very interesting. They were arrested in New York and California, respectively, for their participation in a scheme to charge mobile phone customers millions of dollars in fees for unsolicited recurring text messages. So it's kind of like you probably get like a text, and it'll say, do you want to get your horoscope every month, or do you want to get like the latest trivia and all this kind of
just BS, just a bunch of BS,
like BS, like celebrity updates and this kind of thing. And these people had no idea, like they didn't realize they were consenting. It's actually a term. It's called auto-subscribing. And so these people were getting hit with a $9.99 charge on their phone bill, and most people don't even notice.
Right.
So anyway, the charges include wire fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. This scheme affected hundreds of thousands of consumers throughout the country and generated tens of millions of dollars in proceeds, which the defendants apportioned among themselves and were used to fund a lavish lifestyle of expensive vacations, gambling, just like millions and millions of dollars were generated from this. People had no idea they're getting charged this monthly fee. They would get like, groups of phone numbers, and somehow just like, it's beyond me, the cybercrime angle of it and how this was all done. Like there was this elaborate software program that was written. It was in the press release. It's like 4 pages long, but it goes into detail on this. So so that's a really neat case. And then a couple other cases I just wanted to touch on real quick. These were narcotics investigations. So we work with like the DEA and the FBI on, usually it'll be like an interstate distribution, but the first one involves an individual named Ronald Kamvonse and phone. These names are kind of hard because it's phone Fitat Volarat. So his last name is Volarat.
Okay.
And Cam pleaded guilty to conspiracy to distribute and possess marijuana and conspiracy to engage in money laundering. His conduct involved at least 60 kilograms, but less than 80. So that's how kind of the guidelines range works. It'll be a range of how much you're distributing. The packages were regularly sent from California and distributed to a large-scale marijuana dealer in the Hartford, Connecticut area. He laundered large amounts of marijuana proceeds and regularly structured cash deposits of the proceeds at banks in Connecticut. Over $333,000 in structured deposits were transferred from Connecticut to California through bank accounts in his name and his family members. So that's where the money laundering comes in, when they try to disguise the proceeds and put them in family members' names. Do you know what the term structured means? Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with that, with cash transactions?
Yep.
So structuring cash under the $10,000 threshold to avoid the reporting requirement. That's a big area that we focus on, and trying to ensure people understand that and comply with that.
Right, because they're going in, they're depositing, say, $7,000 on Friday, and then on Monday they go in with another $5,000, and then they go in again on Thursday with another $6,000, and they think it's because it's separated and under 10 that no one's going to figure it out.
Right.
I mean, that's probably a time frame, but to avoid that $10,000 mark.
Correct.
Trying to do.
So that's when you have to fill out the form. It's called the currency transaction report, and then that gets filed with the bank, and then what's called FinCEN is the agency that oversees that. But yeah, so usually you'll see that kind of activity amongst drug dealers and the co-conspirators. There's another case, and this was similar. This was methamphetamine, and this was worked out of Boston. So there's 3 gentlemen. I just want to, actually 1 female and 2 gentlemen. Adolfo Castilleja, Dennis Brady, and Stacy Devaney. Stacy
Devaney. I don't like it when I hear other Stacys are doing things that are bad. They give the rest of us Stacys a bad name.
Totally unrelated. They conspired to distribute methamphetamine and laundered the drug proceeds into bank accounts. More than 100 packages were shipped, again from California, to locations on the East Coast. Castilleja provided instructions for structuring the cash deposits of more than $900,000 in drug proceeds into California-based bank accounts that he controlled. So they all conspired in the scheme in various aspects of the distribution and the structuring and money laundering. Same with Volarat and Kamvonse.
That's insane.
Yeah. These are not nice people, and they all got pretty significant prison sentences.
It's interesting, Amy, because people don't think when you watch TV and you see, the DEA seized 4 truckloads of marijuana or cocaine or whatever. They don't realize that there is actually the IRS is probably involved in something like that, because there are other consequences that happen other than just that illegal drug activity.
Exactly. The whole point of it is to the financial end of it, and that's where we utilize our expertise to follow the money, so to speak.
Right.
Come up with. Other agencies have jurisdiction over money laundering too, so we're not in every case. We try to pick and choose because our resources are so low to be in the narcotics investigations that are bigger organizations that are involving much more money versus just like a smaller time local dealer, more of the interstate, transactions.
Right.
Yeah, we definitely want to be in those types of cases.
And in that big dollar volume, those guys they're likely multiple banks. They're not going to the same bank. I mean, if you're a teller and you have a half a brain and you see the same dude coming in with wads of cash every week, every couple weeks, you're going to catch on to that. So there's so much more than just one guy doing that. They're likely at multiple banks. They've got multiple people involved. All right, Johnny, you're going to go to the bank today, and then Max, you're going to go to the bank in 5 days, and that's an operation.
Yeah.
And they'll use family members and friends and vehicles will be in other people's names, and houses will be in other people's names. There was another one I printed out. I was just looking for. It was Marilis Maldonado, and she it was her boyfriend that was convicted first, and then she pled guilty and was sentenced. And primarily her role was, what assets were put in her name with the drug program. So she was only sentenced to probation because she had a lesser role, and the question was, did she know? Did she not know? So, when push came to shove, she received only probation, but it was for the laundering aspect that she was involved in.
That's just nutso.
So, wow. I don't know. I know we didn't get to everything, but this was a really awesome for me. I love this stuff anyway, and I will say that I definitely want to thank you, Amy, for coming and joining us because I mean, we do that day-to-day client work, and you just think of that $2.5 million of payroll taxes. I mean, I get mad when my client, when you're like, okay, did you pay your payroll taxes? I know it was $1,700, and they're like, no, and you're like, you'll go to jail. And and it's just such a smaller volume. But you think of $2.5 million, like, what are you thinking, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, that's why we end up paying them, footing the bill when push comes to shove. Stacy, I know you have to jump. I know that we got.
I didn't realize it was so late. I apologize.
No, thank you, Amy, so much. We appreciate your time and certainly your openness to answer questions and be part of what we're doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll be in touch with you.
Sounds good. Take care. Good night.
All right, good night, everybody.
Bye.